Scott, what's your take on this topic?
Yeah, I mean, island living in the tropics in and of itself is going to lend itself to a slower pace, a more relaxed pace, a more, enjoy the weather, enjoy the environment that you're in. But then when it comes to the racial side of it, I haven't been to a place where it's such a cultural melting pot of a number of different races that are all together. And I'll never forget when I moved out here a couple of years later, I went back to Charlotte, North Carolina, and my soccer coach from high school happened to say that Hawaii was one of his favorite places. This was over 20 years ago, because of the number of races living together in harmony. That we don't have a lot of racial tension, and for me, I've always told people, and this is a part of the reason why I'm here, is I feel like it's as close to living in a foreign country as you can get without leaving the U.S. And in doing so, we had so many immigrants from the plantation days and things, and still do, that we have so many different cultural, different cultures that bring their impact here, and they're all embraced in some different way. They're all adopted. So from food to cultural aspects, there's a sense for me of being able to constantly learn and try new foods and try new ways of living in things that I think is an amazing place to be, and that I can't get in most other places, and the people here live in harmony for the most part.
Yeah, it's that harmony certainly from various places. Certainly Honolulu is especially is such a multicultural area. It's got so many kind of different influences. I could definitely see that thing, and the living in harmony is kind of observed. What do you kind of see? What's your favorite? What do you like it? What do you think about it? Why do you think it's the case?
Well, I think how is it different? I mean, that's going to come from a point of reference on where you're from. Um, One of the unique things about Hawaii compared to a lot of other US states is there's no one race or skin color that is just overwhelmingly predominant. Um, on Maui, for example, the census data shows, I mean, about 30% Asian, 30% white, and a little over 30% mixed race and Pacific Islander. So it's it's really a mix of people from different cultures and heritages, and even people who are are white. There's Portuguese, there's um, Hispanic, white people from California. I mean, it's kind of a mix of people. I recently helped some clients purchase a home here on Maui, and they were raising two young boys who were mixed race, and they were just so happy to move here because they came from a community, a really nice suburb in Oregon, and every other kid in the school was white. And here in Hawaii, they just fit in. I mean, they're just like everybody else. So they were really kind of excited to be able to have that experience for their kids growing up in a place like this.
Yeah, it's really amazing, and I'd like to thanks Heidi for bringing that up. The multicultural, the mixed race stuff is like just a natural here. It's just like it's kind of that's the way it is, right? It's everything is mixed over here, which is like so cool. I want to ask those of you that have recently moved here that are watching. Can you throw some comments on it? What's your take on this topic? I'd love to hear from you. What have you seen as the experience? What's been your perspective? What do you think is what do you like about it? What's different about it? Like as Heidi said, very correctly spoke Heidi. It's really the how it's different could only be in the context of where you're from, which is why Dylan can't tell us why it's different because he was born and raised here, so he doesn't know how it's different. But you, Heidi, you came from a small town in the Midwest, and Scott, you came from North Carolina. I guess that's considered what southeast, the southeast coast. And so I'd love to hear from all of you, especially those of you who just moved there. Mark Whitehill, throw some comments on here. Joan put it here. Thank you, Joan. I grew up in New York, which is a true melting pot, but here it seems, at least so far for me, I've been lucky to not meet any quote strangers. Everyone is friendly and welcoming. Yeah, I give it to tell you my perspective on this whole thing. I had I I was born in Chicago and came to Hawaii when I was 21 years old. And what really struck me about the melting pot was I thought that Hawaii is much, much, much better integrated culturally, racially than Chicago is, for example. Chicago, like Joan says, like New York, it's a melting pot. There's all kinds of, everyone's there. However, in Chicago, people kind of keep to their respective neighborhoods. There's Chinatown, there's Greektown, there's the Italian district, there's the Black district, there's the Hispanic district, and there's like these little pockets, so you can kind of drive from one little pocket to another. But even though there's a melting pot, it's like if it's a melting pot, not really, because all the ingredients are separate. Whereas when I came to Hawaii, what really struck me, and you could just kind of see it in your neighborhood, is like, you got the Filipino guy with I'm, just rattling off on my own neighbors, a guy, Japanese, Korean, Filipino, Haole, Polynesians, and they're all on the same, we're all in the same block. And this is the case almost universally throughout Hawaii. I love that idea of a true cultural melting pot where people are living side by side. And I think that's an amazing piece. I think the other thing that really kind of struck me, and when I first came here, I never forget the first time, was that I was like, couldn't have been here for like more than a couple of weeks, right? And I'm cruising in Waikiki, and I saw what really struck me was I saw a mixed race couple. It was a Japanese girl and an African guy, and I saw the two of them. And what was so cool about it was that no one even gave it a second glance. Zero. It was just like, who cares? Like nothing, right? Whereas in certain areas of Chicago at the time, this was in the early '80s, and you may have gotten at least a couple of second glances, right? It would have been something out of the ordinary. I think that was the issue as I kind of verbalized this. In Hawaii, it was nothing. It was not at all. It was like I par for the course, totally natural, totally normal. Where in Chicago, it's like, oh, gee, you don't see that too often. So I don't know what you folks got any sort of comment that you want to add in on that. Here's the topic I kind of want us to touch on for today, which is Hawaii's racial diversity. So what's interesting about Hawaii I've always loved Hawaii's racial mix. It's just beautiful. I was enthralled by it the day I landed almost 40 years ago. And so I kind of wanted to touch base to give everyone else a sense of what this is all is. It's like what Hawaii's racial diversity. How do you see as Hawaii is different? How is it different from either your experiences on the mainland or what we kind of see or hear on the mainland? What makes Hawaii a different racial? Hawaii's got incredible racial integration. What makes Hawaii different? And what is it that you like the most? What is that really kind of sticks out the most that you like about Hawaii's racial diversity? And then finally, why do you think that's the case? Why is it different here? What makes Hawaii? Why is it? What do you think are the underpinnings, the underlying fundamentals that make Hawaii this amazing, racially diverse, kind of beautiful place? So those are the topics. That's the general topic. I kind of want to get your guys' sense on this. Why don't we do this? How about Heidi? I tell you what, Heidi, why don't you warm up a little bit on this? I'm not going to kind of throw you into it right off the bat. So why don't we kind of start with you, Dylan? Why don't you kind of you take a crack at it? What is your sense on this overall topic? What's it different? What do you like the most, and why do you think that's the case here?
I don't know if I'm the most qualified to speak on this because I don't have a lot of experience other places. I have lived in other places, but for me, it's just a sense of living on an island and the community that creates, right? So if you live in a big city or a place with a lot of people, you could be mean to somebody and maybe never see them again. But when you live on an island in a small town, you don't really have the liberty to do that if you want to last for a long time. And so there's that sense of community where I think, you don't want to burn bridges, and you want to make sure that, it's a golden rule, right? You want to treat people how you want to be treated. And there's this sense of collective community. I don't know if it comes from the plantations or just the Hawaiian culture from back in the day, but everybody's responsible for everybody else, right? There's this collective sense of you pick up the trash at the beach, even though if it's not yours. If you see a kid in the street that looks lost, you just take care of them. You just, everybody has a sense of responsibility to everybody else. And that's something that I think is definitely, I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't exist in other places, but it's definitely more universal and stronger here. And like like we said in the past, right? If you don't have that, and that's not a something, that's not a racial thing or a cultural thing. It's really just a human thing. And the humans that don't have that don't make it here, right? So it almost is um, a self weeding out process with the community here. Is if you don't have that, it just, if that doesn't appeal to you, you don't last a long time here.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point that you bring up. I think it's the fundamental part of island living. It's a fundamental part of what you got in a small, tight island community, which is a kind of, no matter how big or small Hawaii may feel, it's a tiny, tiny, tiny place in so many ways. Joan is chiming in. That's true. Joan's referring to my talk about the pockets in Chicago. Joan says that's true. In New York, there are pockets. Also, here in Hawaii, people are people, and if you can't accept that, don't move here. Well said. That's what it is, man. I mean, it's the coolest thing. Patrick's got a little story for us. Let's see. About a year ago, after I had been tuning into your bi-weekly broadcast for a couple of months, Scott and I talked on the phone one afternoon. Nice. Scott absolutely confirmed the non-racial tension in Hawaii as found in the east coast of the mainland. Patrick, I'm so thankful because so far Hawaii has avoided this whole, identifying by race kind of a deal, right? In Hawaii, it's interesting because we identify, but it's almost in a joking way, right? I mean, it used to be more in style than it is now. It's less in style. There was a great comedian, what's his name, Dylan, the guy the Filipino guy that makes fun of everybody.
Well, there's Augie T and there's Frank DeLima. Frank DeLima kind of fought.
Frank DeLima was the classic guy.
Rap Replinger was kind of
Rap Replinger when he was around.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a whole classic, and Frank DeLima is the guy. If you do a Google search, Frank DeLima, and find his videos, he was classic, famous for making fun of everybody. Rap Replinger did. There was another guy too. I forgot his name, but he was almost kind of like borderline. He was like a Don Wrinkles, like a local Don Wrinkles. I forgot his name is already. But it used to be, we used to always make fun of everybody, because like Heidi's point, right? To Heidi's point, everybody.
Mel Kabang.
Mel Kabang, thank you. Mel Kabang. That's the guy. Mel Kabang was famous.
And you know who does that? And you know who does it now is Joe Coy.
Joe Coy?
He kind of does it on a national level. If you watch Joe Coy's comedy, it's very because he's Filipino, so he makes fun of Filipinos, but he makes fun of everybody, but it's the same kind of style of comedy.
How do you spell that last name, Coy? K-O-I or
K-O-Y?
K-O-Y. Go look at Joe Coy, everybody. Yeah. So this was a classic thing in Hawaii. And I think part of it was, Heidi, to your point, which, you said it quickly, but it's a very profound thing. Everybody in Hawaii is a minority. There is no one's at plus 50%. No one. Everyone's at, like you said, Heidi, we're all at about a third. It's a third Asians, third Polynesians mix, third Caucasians, give or take. And like you said, Heidi, even the Caucasians break up even further because for some reason in Hawaii, a Portuguese guy is not seen as not considered a haole guy. He's considered a Portuguese guy. You don't call a Portuguese guy haole. You call a Portuguese guy or Portuguese, which is interesting. And that's why I kind of, as a Greek, I always felt somewhat privileged. Actually, it's kind of funny. I'll reveal kind of a little personal, not even a story, but something that I knew that Hawaii was the place for me. And the reason why I knew that Hawaii was the place for me, because in Chicago, you're not a Greek, you're an effing Greek in Chicago. But when I came to Hawaii, it was exotic. When I told, when I was at the bar and the girls would ask me, where are you from? I said, oh, I'm from, what's your makeup? I said, oh, I'm Greek. Now in Chicago, like, Greek, But in Hawaii, it was like, oh, Greek, wow, cool, exotic, interesting. Haven't seen that before. And that's okay. I know I'm in heaven. I am in heaven when a Greek when a Greek is seen as an exotic being, as opposed to an everyday immigrant that just got here. I knew I had found heaven. That's my little found heaven story. For sure, I knew Hawaii was my place. Bernard, thanks, Bernard. Bernard says, I grew up in the Philippines. My wife is Japanese and I'm Chinese. What place on earth besides Hawaii would allow me to have that community, speak those languages, eat those foods, and mixed lifestyles from those three ethnicities, all in close proximity with such balanced diversity? Boom, man, if I could scream into the mic, I would just like, Bernard, you nailed it right there. I just kind of want to think I want to leave that on the show, like leave that on the screen for the rest of the show. That is fabulous. Well put. Exactly correct. And the answer, Bernard, is nowhere but Hawaii. Nowhere but Hawaii can you get that kind of an experience.